The chill of the Walmart freezer section always sends a shiver down my spine, but working the night shift as a stalker keeps me constantly looking over my shoulders, especially working there after hours. But being an overnight stalker pays the bills, and I still work the job. But little did I know that one night it would turn into a terrifying experience. It was around midnight, and the store was eerily quiet, with the only sounds being the shopping carts of a customer or the occasional beep of a checkout scanner breaking the silence. I was in aisle 13, stocking frozen dinners, and it felt like a normal night, not much different from any other. But it would be that moment that would turn my life into hell, and that's when I first noticed a dude when making my way around the store. He was pale, almost ghostly, with sunken eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I went. At first, I just assumed he was a customer browsing the shelves for an item he was looking for, but as the night went on, his presence became unnerving. Every time I glanced down the aisle I was in, he was there, lurking around, and didn't even try to at least pretend like he was shopping for something. His gaze was fixed on me, a twisted smirk on his face as he giggled softly, but loud enough that I could hear him. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, chalking it up to exhaustion and paranoia, but as the hours passed, his behavior grew more erratic. He would dart between aisles, always keeping me in his line of sight. The other employees seemed oblivious to his actions, lost in their own tasks or distracted by their phones, which didn't help me feel safe. It made me feel more alone. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, studying me. The way he stared felt invasive, like he was peering into my soul, searching for something. And as the night dragged on, I became increasingly anxious. I avoided aisle 13 whenever possible, but it felt like he was everywhere, his laughter echoing throughout the quiet store, making me feel like going home early. Then, things took a darker turn. I was in the back room taking inventory when I heard a soft whisper behind me. "Come with me," someone whispered, causing my heart to almost explode. I spun around, but there was no one to be found, just a cold, empty storage room. But then panic set in as I realized that the pale man must have followed me, so I hurried back onto the sales floor, hoping to find safety in numbers with my fellow employees. But he was waiting for me, standing at the end of aisle 13, his eyes wide and a creepy grin upon his face. "Come play with me," he whispered out, loud enough for me to hear, his voice sending a wave of terror through me, causing me to back away slowly while trying to keep my composure. But he followed, step by step, his laughter growing louder with each passing moment, and it was then that I knew I had to bring awareness to the situation, so I sprinted towards the front of the store, calling out for help. The other employees finally noticed the commotion and rushed to my aid. But the time security arrived, the pale man had gone, but his laughter remained in my ears, scarring me every time I think back on hearing it, and it still has me afraid to step foot in aisle 13. To this day, I can't shake the feeling of being watched, of knowing that he's out there somewhere, possibly still lurking around, waiting for a chance to get me or someone else alone. It was during the month of July, on the 24th back in early 2010, while I was working my shift at Walmart, as I made my way through the store restocking shelves in the dead of night. Working the graveyard shift had its perks, less crowded areas and fewer customers to deal with, but it also came with its own set of challenges, and on that night I encountered a challenge I wish I didn't. It started subtly, as these things often do. I first noticed a guy about a week prior, which is a man I nicknamed the Watcher, who looked to be in his late 30s with unkempt hair and a nervous twitch in his movement. He'd stay near the entrance for hours, watching as customers came and went, his eyes scanning the store with an intensity that made me feel uneasy around him. At first, I brushed him off as a curious shopper, maybe someone killing time during a late-night walk, but as the days went by, his presence became more ominous. He wasn't shopping, and I'm pretty sure I knew what it was he was doing. He was studying, watching, waiting. I tried to alert my co-workers to the strange man's behavior, but they brushed off my concerns as me overreacting. "He's probably just lost," they'd say, or maybe he's waiting for someone. But I knew better. There was something off about that guy. Something scary in the way he watched us all in a predatory way. Hell, one night as I was stocking shelves in the electronics section, I felt his eyes on me. So I looked up and I saw him standing at the end of the aisle, a calculating look in his eyes. He didn't say a word, he just watched. And at that time, I just hurried through my job, trying to ignore the feeling of being stared down. But every time I looked over my shoulder, he was there, standing in a different place, just looking. And it wasn't until a few nights later that his true intentions became clear. I was taking a break in the break room when I heard muffled voices and the sound of footsteps. Curious, I crept closer to the door, my heart pounding as I became more nervous. Opening it just a little bit and peering through the crack, I saw him. A man in a dark hoodie, his face partially obscured by a scarf. He was speaking to another guy, their voices low but urgent. My blood ran cold as I realized what was happening. They were planning to rob the store. As quietly as I could, I closed the door as I backed away slowly, my mind racing. Should I call the police? Alert my coworkers? My hands shook as I reached for my phone, but before I could dial any number, the door to the break room swung open. But it wasn't anyone who was employed at Walmart. It was him, the watcher. He stared at me with those same cold eyes and a serious look on his face. "Called us, huh?" he sneered. I stumbled backwards, almost tripping over my own 2 feet, my heart pounding in my ears. I don't know what you're talking about," I replied. He laughed, a hollow, mocking sound. "You think you're clever, watching us. Well, we've been watching you too." My mind raced as I tried to think of a way out, but before I could respond, he lunged forward, grabbing me by the throat. Panic surged through me as I struggled to break free, knocking over things in the process, and I tried the best I could to scream out for help, hoping someone would hear me over the din of the store. And thankfully they did. Seconds later, my coworkers had burst into the room, drawn by the commotion, which caused the would-be robbers to flee, disappearing out the store's back exit. I was shaken but unharmed, saved by the timely intervention of my colleagues. As the police arrived and took our statements, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me. The watcher had been right there, stalking everyone, including me, possibly seeing our routines and where we went to in the store, and at what time we did. And both him and his accomplice waited for their chance to strike, and unfortunately for me, they knew that I knew what they were planning, which most likely was the reason they attacked me. And even though this happened to me a long time ago, I still get the occasional nightmare and night sweats where I dream that the watcher choked me to death. If you can take anything from my story, remember this. If you see someone acting suspicious, chances are they are planning something bad. So don't make the same mistake I did and call the authorities. I'm a female, now much older than I was when this took place, and it happened back when I was working the night shift at Walmart, which for me personally was the worst decision I have ever made in my life, mainly because the nighttime is when the weirdos come out, which made one night for me a traumatic one. The night began innocently enough, back when I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college, trying to make ends meet while I figured out my next steps in life. The night shift was a temporary gig, or so I thought, and I even told myself that it would be easy work, since the store would be just about empty, but that is not how it turned out for me. The first time I spotted this man, I told myself that he was nothing to worry about. He was a tall, imposing figure with a scruffy beard and bloodshot eyes that seemed to stay focused just on me, for some reason. And at first, I thought he was just another weirdo pervert who would get his fill of looking me over before he moved on and I never saw him again. But then I noticed him standing in one position, almost lifeless, and for hours, and never too far away from where I would be. It wasn't long before his presence became more threatening though. He would watch me as I restocked shelves or helped customers, his eyes intense and unsettling. I tried to ignore him, focusing on my work and keeping a professional demeanor, but deep down I couldn't lose the feeling that I was being watched for a sinister purpose. Well, One night, as I was sitting in the employee lounge, I would overhear my coworkers talking about him, saying how much the guy creeped them out, even stating that they've seen him hanging around the parking lot after hours. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be the same man who had been watching me? The thought had me fearful and worried, and as the weeks went by, his behavior escalated even more. He started showing up outside the store during my shifts, just standing there, looking. I tried to avoid glancing in his direction, but I could feel his eyes burning into me. One night, after my shift ended, I stepped out into the parking lot, eager to head home and put the unsettling night behind me. But there he was, standing next to a lamppost, his eyes locked on me with his mouth wide open. As fast as I could, I ran to my car, terrifying thoughts running through my mind as I scratched up my door trying to unlock it. As quickly as possible, every instinct telling me to get away from him, to run. But when I finally looked back at him, he was walking towards me, his eyes still wide and his mouth still opened. It was as if he were a zombie, making the moment alone with him the cause of me now seeing a psychiatrist and taking medications. But at the time this took place, I froze, my mind racing. What did he want? Why was he following me around? I couldn't understand why I was the only person he targeted. Before I could even process the question in my mind, the sound of approaching footsteps coming from a different direction broke the tense silence. It was a security guard making rounds in the parking lot. The stalker's eyes narrowed, but he stepped back, disappearing into the darkness before I could gather my wits. I reported the incident to my manager and a security team, but they could only do so much. They promised to keep an eye out and patrol the area more frequently, but I still felt exposed and vulnerable. Over the next couple of days, I tried to convince myself that I was just overreacting and that he had moved on to another target. But deep down, I knew he was still around somewhere. Well, he did return. A few nights after, as I was leaving the store once my shift was over, I saw him again. This time, he was standing right beside my car, his eyes fixated on me. I froze in place, my heart racing as I debated my next move. Should I scream for help, run back into the store, or possibly try and confront the man? Thankfully, I wouldn't have to do any of those things. Before I could make a decision, the police arrived who had been parked nearby and who was alerted by the security team. They approached the creep cautiously, instructing him to step away from my car. He didn't comply. He just stood there, eyes wide, mouth open, as if he were drugged up on something. But then something changed. His demeanor shifted from blanked out to erratic in an instant. He started screaming at the two officers, his voice filled with rage and desperation. "I just want to talk to her. Why won't you let me talk to her?" He bellowed, his eyes locked on me as he threw himself around. The police acted swiftly, cuffing him and leading him away, all the while he stayed screaming and cursing at them as they put him in the back of one of their cruisers. And I will never forget him turning his head around as he for one last time began to stare at me with his bloodshot widened eyes and his mouth opened up as they drove off with him, and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and fear at the same time. The creep was gone, but the trauma of those nights remained with me. The fear of being watched, followed, and confronted by a stranger had left its mark on me, and I never really feel safe anymore, not even in the most familiar places.